Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Important things to talk about today. Republican lawmakers continue to change the political landscape in Wisconsin by passing legislation that is expected to dramatically weaken private labor unions. The Milwaukee School Board surprises some people by voting to extend the contract of a superintendent who has been in the job less than a year and by approving a $10 million remodeling job for a vacant school building. And we'll wonder about the wisdom of giving public school kids a few more days off each year because they are Muslim holy days. Okay, let me introduce everybody. You know Kevin Fisher, who spent many years here as a broadcast journalist. We all know longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. And of course, Gerard Randall, education and employment consultant. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's first talk about, so after nearly 24 hours of debate, most of it from Democrats complaining how destructive the legislation would be, the state assembly passed right to work. Private employers and the unions can no longer force you to pay union dues. The governor will sign it into law on Monday. Once again, a completely party line vote, 62 to 35. Okay, look into the crystal ball. Will this make Wisconsin more competitive when it comes to job creation? Kevin.
It can and it should. If you look at the patterns in other right-to-work states, the U.S. Census Bureau studied average median household incomes that from 1990 until 2012, significantly those incomes in American households in right-to-work states, those median incomes significantly outpaced the incomes of people in non-right-to-work states. Conversely, incomes in non-right-to-work states went down. So I think you have the possibility, you have the opportunity to make some strides in our economy. Will it happen overnight? No. It's been a slow process in even other states that have enacted right-to-work legislation. But over time, I think you see the change in the positive direction. Look at your businesses prior to Michigan becoming a right-to-work state. 2/3 of businesses said they weren't even interested in coming to Michigan until Michigan passed right-to-work legislation. That's true across the board. If you're a right-to-work state, most private employers don't even want to think about coming into your state. Now, I think you're going to see even more businesses wanting to come to Wisconsin because of this legislation that was passed and that the governor is going to sign. It is not going to do what opponents have vilified. You're not going to see unions disappear. You're not going to see babies die. You're going to see the possibility of our economy even moving in a more positive direction because of this law.
So, Joel, in progressive Wisconsin, this is kind of earth-shattering, but nationally, now we become one of 25 states with this legislation. So look into the crystal ball here in Wisconsin. Do we benefit or does it hurt us?
Of course it hurts us, and Kevin actually knows that. You know, I can pick out a whole bunch of statistics that show just the opposite, that in fact, wages are lower in right-to-work states, and we all know that. And Republicans know that. That's why they're passing it, of course, because their masters who funded their elections want to pay their workers less. I mean, that's clear. The thing is, the idea of attracting business by wiping out your unions, that's over. Yes, there was a time when those low-wage southern non-union states, northern manufacturers were moving their businesses south because they could pay workers in the South a lot less. But now they can move their businesses to Thailand and pay them even less than in the South. So the whole globalization thing has wiped out that advantage, if you want to call it advantage, to pay your workers so little that they have very little money to spend, and therefore those deep South states, have bad economies. We know that, and it's because people don't have money in their pockets to spend. And when your population isn't spending, buying goods and services, your manufacturers and your businesses, need a lot fewer workers to provide goods and services because no one has any money to spend. That's all known, and it doesn't matter as a thing because the Republicans were going to pass this. Facts didn't matter. There were more than 400 construction companies who actually company owners, a lot of them are Republicans, but they were asking the Republican legislature not to pass this because, in fact, public works unions, construction unions, depend on unions to train their workers with skills, provide training programs, give workers skills in order to get the jobs, and so they have a skilled workforce to draw from. But none of those things ever got discussed because Republicans didn't want to discuss them. They would make up statistics like Kevin is using and use those cover stories as an excuse and not listen to the people who testified hour after hour after hour, including many Republican business owners.
Who testified about everything but the bill. They testified about...
Including Republican business owners, I said.
They testified about evil Scott Walker and Act 10 and ALEC and the segregation in the South and racism.
This is ALEC legislation.
Babies that'll die if this bill is passed. It was a typical liberal ploy to divert and distract away from what really is in the bill.
Republican business owners? I'm sorry.
Everybody
Those
knew.
your typical liberals.
Everybody knew a week ago what this vote was going to be. Everybody knew 2 weeks ago what the vote was going to be. What was the point of going all night long? What was the point? Doesn't something like that just discourage people from getting into politics?
Well, first off, I think there was a small bit of sincerity in wanting to give people their day. Get it out there. Let them have their say so that that's one less thing to come back and be attacked on.
But at 2 in the morning?
2 in the morning. When it comes to the process stuff and partisan voting, all I can think of is Obamacare. And so it's kind of sour grapes to complain about the process that was used here. 2 wrongs don't necessarily make a right, but there's very little that the Dems can say about the process that was used here when the big glaring, egregious piece of legislation that was passed on a partisan vote was Obamacare.
They gave people more health care.
Ends doesn't justify the means. Not in my book on this one. And so that's one aspect of it. But I do think that over time, what you're going to see happen are those businesses that do make the decision to stay in the U.S. with their operations, that Wisconsin will become a state in play for that business. The other, you had companies like Briggs that moved operations out, and they brought operations back, actually, because what they were finding is that the quality of the work was better here and that there were other costs that were associated, transportation and the like, that actually made more sense to have their operations in the U.S. and in their home state of Wisconsin. So I think you're going to see some of that dynamic come into play as well.
And the way you raise quality of workers is to pay them better, not less.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So you have more and more people who are demanding flexibility in the workplace, more and more people who are asking for adjustments to their schedules so that they can do work at home or have block scheduling for their contribution
Flex
to the business. Yep. And so I think you're going to see more of that, and I think you'll see more of it because businesses will feel they don't have union rules that will compound their ability to make those kinds of adjustments.
All right, next topic. 3 interesting developments in the past few days for the Milwaukee Public School District. They extend the contract and give a raise to a superintendent who has only been on the job for a few months. They approve a plan to spend $10 million to renovate the vacant old Malcolm X school building. And a study comes out that shows more black students are suspended in Wisconsin than in any other state. Do you describe these things as positives or as negatives for what many say is a pretty troubled school district?
Well, I think certainly extending the contract to the superintendent is a very big positive. She's a very impressive lady, and I don't think there's any question about that. Of course, the report on suspensions is appalling, and I was surprised because I know that there's been an effort within the Milwaukee Public Schools to move more towards I understand. School systems are frustrated with kids in their classes that are making it more difficult for other kids to learn, and teachers are frustrated. But boy, the last thing those students need is to be put out of the schools. If you keep suspending kids who are already having trouble getting through school and are already having trouble, focusing on school, and you keep suspending them, what you're basically doing is sending them out of the school. Those are the last kids who should be pushed out of the schools. We should be trying alternatives to keep them in school and educate them, and programs specifically aimed at them. if they get in the habit of not going to school, which they do if they're repeatedly suspended, you've got a dropout that you've created, that the school system itself has created, and that to me is just appalling. It really is.
When I saw the headline, the first thought that went through my head was, wow, that's shocking, all these people being suspended. But then I thought, okay, the number one reason a lot of people don't send their kids to Milwaukee Public Schools is because of safety. They worry about safety. And then I thought, okay, if they're suspending kids who are causing problems, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well, here's something that I just learned a few weeks ago in talking with some of the leadership of a community-based organization that has daycare operations here in town. More and more of the younger people that are going through daycare programs are evidencing some of the kinds of behavior issues that require a lot of intensive support. And they ultimately grow up and go into the public schools. Many of them that go off into alternative programs end up back into the public schools. I was one who taught students who were special needs students while I was a teacher in MPS, and I can tell you there is a dramatic difference between how kids get the support that they need to address their behavior issues then than what they're able to receive now. And the more you cut back on funding that supports things like school psychologists, school social workers, the more of that you're going to see. So
that is absolutely right.
Yeah,
and what's happening in the state budget regarding education is just, that is feeding the problem. We should suspend those legislators and that governor instead of so many kids.
There was an article that was just in the Journal that also recognizing this issue around student suspensions, black student suspensions especially, that called for more black teachers, and it pointed out how few black teachers there are and how few are in the pipeline being prepared for teaching. And that, to me, is probably another one of the more troubling aspects of trying to come up with quick solutions to the problem. It takes time to properly prepare someone who will go into the classrooms that are, by our own acknowledgement, having a lot of difficulty dealing with kids that come in with a lot more trauma. These kids, when they come into a classroom and they're 3, 4 years old, sometimes the only sleep they get is during the nap time. So that gets us back to how do we address this whole thing holistically and not just pinpoint little pieces out of it and say, well, if we only were allowed to suspend kids, that might be the answer. It doesn't necessarily work that cleanly.
Kevin, give us your thoughts on this Malcolm X Academy thing. So St. Marcus wanted to buy the building. MPS said, no way, no way. Now MPS said, we're going to use it and reopen it as a school after we pump $10 million.
What an economically foolish decision on the part of MPS. We're going to spend $10 million that we don't have on a crummy old building to replicate a once failing school. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I think it's petty because I think the only motivation here was to prevent a private school that was doing very well from expanding into that building. There's great competition. And liberals are for choice, it seems, for everything but education. All right? And I think it was just a not very wise or prudent decision to waste that kind of money when you had a chance to maybe make $1 million. Instead, I think you're wasting $10 million.
Let me the idea of expanding Rufus King, the most successful high school in the system, into a successful middle school, Rufus King Middle School, that's no waste of money. That is an excellent idea, and we should put some resources in it.
That would be my point exactly, that the replication of highly successful programs within the MPS portfolio is what's going into that building. And if the building was satisfactory for St. Marcus to want to move into. Why can't MPS keep its own building for its own successful
So
programs?
why did it take so long to make this decision? And
That's a fair question.
And MPS is sitting on all kinds of other space and buildings.
Not anymore.
That they're not
anymore.
They have not been utilizing or have been underutilizing.
They turned over what was available to the city and asked them to dispose of it.
$10 million. Okay. They could have made $1 million.
I would love to put
and
more,
we talk all the
even
time
more
about
than
here
that
about
into MPS.
We don't
Thank
have
you.
enough money for education. We talk about that all the time, that we need to throw more money, more money, more money. And tell me how this helps that.
Well, because it's one facility that's been offline for a while that now goes back online for a highly successful program. And no one disputes that that program that they want to replicate is one that has had a lot of success.
Oh, it works. Oh, it works. Because I'm in Rufus King a lot more than you guys are, and I know how successful that school is. But I still wonder about the economics here. To me, it's very fuzzy. It doesn't add up.
All right, next topic. The New York City School District became the first big city school district in the country the other day to say that kids will get an additional 2 days off every year in honor of 2 Muslim holy days, just like they get off for Christian holy days and Jewish holy days. They say it's because of the huge number of Muslim kids in the district, but some wonder if it's just politically correct pandering. What if the Muslim population grows in Milwaukee? Should they do the same thing?
I certainly think in communities where the Muslim population is substantial, we're supposed to treat religions equally, and we're supposed to respect other people's religions. You're absolutely right. We've had Christmas off, a Christian holiday, throughout our history. We've had Jewish holidays off. And when there is a substantial Muslim community, it makes only sense I would bet. I know that, the Muslim community here in Milwaukee isn't big enough to shut down the system for holy days, but I would bet that there is, in fact, some accommodation for Muslims in our school system to respect their holy days. I know there is at the college level. Universities always respect religions and allow students to take off, their personal holy days based on their religion. We know that we've made this assumption that, it's perfectly all right to take, Christian holidays off because, isn't everyone Christian? Well, no, they're not. And the Islam is the largest religion in the world, and more cities in this country. Unless this was a Rush Limbaugh issue, I don't even know why it would be controversial. The Constitution says, we do respect religion, and freedom of religion is basic to this country.
Well, let's see.
A lot of people, though, when they're talking about the public school systems in big cities, say the kids need more days of class, not fewer.
Right. Well, it used to be Christmas that kids got off. It used to be Easter that kids got off. There used to be accommodations for things like Passover. That doesn't happen anymore, frankly, because, we don't even want people to say Christmas is Christmas. Now they call it winter break, spring break.
I don't care what they call it. Everybody gets Christmas off.
Well, they get it off, but at this point, it's not for the same reason. So now,
of course it is.
It is not. It is not.
You're not taking Christmas off because it's Christmas. Does anyone seriously think that? The people who say there's some kind of war on Christmas want us to respect religion, don't they? So why shouldn't you respect all religion?
I don't know what the tipping point is.
Off?
That falls during the same time that Joel would tell us that we're celebrating Christmas.
And we are.
Look, there is a war on Christmas. We can't
even call it that.
Now, see, this is from the guy who a few minutes ago said we should respect all religions.
I respect Christmas. It's my favorite holiday.
You've bashed Christians on this program for years. We can't we can't even say Christmas.
You know nothing.
We can't even put, we can't even put the symbols of Christmas up in schools.
They can't sing religious-oriented carols in schools anymore.
We're talking about giving religious holidays off. We're not talking about having religious ceremonies in schools.
Well, the important issue here is
there's the recognition of religion.
As the mayor before de Blasio, Mayor Bloomberg said, you should have more school days, not less. And where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line in a city like New York, which, you know, celebrates just about every religion in the world? Where do you draw the line? There was a school district in Vermont that is honoring Muslim holidays, but when the Hindus approached the school district to honor their autumn festival of lights, they said no. So what's going to happen when you open the floodgates? And the time has to come when you say, look, we can't keep giving you all these days off in school. When I worked in the state legislature, there were busloads of kids coming in to tour the state capitol. It was a standing joke that, look, you know why the Japanese kids are doing so well in school? Because they're actually in school.
So do you want kids to go to school on Christmas? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't want kids to go to school on Christmas.
But you don't think other religious holidays should be respected?
Kids don't go to school on Easter because it's always on a Sunday.
Exactly, but
okay, what about all the other?
But I think you have to draw the line somewhere, and you can't say, well, there's 120 religions that we honor in this city. We're not going to give you 120 days off.
What about all the other days, like Martin Luther King Day and Veterans Day and President's Day? Should they all be holidays?
Well, many of them are. You know, the decisions of what you honor and what you respect, you know, those are pretty public decisions. And we've always honored Christmas. I'm sorry. There is no war on Christmas.
Nation, Joel.
Liberal.
That's why.
See, that's where you're wrong. We're a nation.
Oh, we're not a Christian nation.
We're a nation that says
all right.
says there will be no state religion. That's in the Constitution. You really ought to read it.
We're not a Christian nation.
You really ought to read it.
You just insulted the majority of people in this nation.
I'm not insulting people by saying that, you know, this nation is a nation of many religions, and that, in fact, our Constitution respects the fact there will be no state religion. You know, what if the Muslims made the United States their state religion? You know, would you respect that? I don't think so. But you think Muslims should live under a Christian nation here?
I don't think that we should, in the interest of keeping kids in school, observe these holidays.
I think we have to look at how we've transitioned out of having school holidays have any religious connotation attached to them. And that is the reality. So when you got, it's the same reality that we have when we talk about some of the holidays that revolve around patriotism. We figured out ways to somehow or the other have them grouped together. We don't have 2 days for to celebrate presidents. We've got 1 day. Just as during the winter break, we've got multiple holidays that occur at that time that are religious oriented, that we celebrate, and the kids have that time off. They can do with it what they wish. So the bottom line for me is, if you're gonna have days off for school that have some type of religious orientation to it, then just block it all together. And kids always have, their families have the discretion, if they don't want their kids to go to school that day, to take that day off.
All right, next topic. So we're living in a Twitter world these days. Everything's fast-paced. Everyone's got opinions about everything. Rick Horowitz is getting into the spirit of the thing, and he's ready to share some of his own quick takes on the news. Rick.
Wasn't I saying last week that I'm sick and tired of Hillary Clinton? Almost 300,000 new jobs last month, the 12th consecutive month of 200,000 plus job growth, and unemployment down to 5.5%. The Mitt Romney economic recovery continues. Two things I have in common with Benjamin Netanyahu: we're both Jews, and neither of us speaks for all of us. One of the many things Mr. Netanyahu and I don't have in common: I don't pretend to speak for all of us. Hillary Clinton's secret email system may not have been criminal, but it's certainly pathological. In Ferguson, Missouri, they can actually ticket you for your manner of walking along roadway. Well, maybe not your manner of walking along roadway. See, the population of Ferguson is roughly 67% black. The people ticketed for how they were walking, 95% black. Just a coincidence, don't you think? Fortunately, Ferguson's the only place in the entire country where anything like this ever happens. So Scott Walker told Fox News last Sunday, quote, "We're trying to discern whether or not it's God's will for us to run." Apparently, he already discerned that God wanted him to open a campaign office in Iowa. So when exactly did Joe Biden become Snow White's eighth dwarf, Gropey? For that matter, who can ever forget Bill O'Reilly's battlefield reporting from the Falklands? Everyone except Bill O'Reilly. If it turns out that Hillary Clinton screwed up worse than we knew on Benghazi, failed to heed warnings, made bad decisions, that will absolutely deepen the tragedy of those 4 lives lost that night. It still won't make 4 a bigger number than 3,000, which is roughly the number of lives lost on 9/11 after President Bush failed to heed warnings. And it won't make for a bigger number than 4,000, which is roughly the number of American lives lost after President Bush decided to invade Iraq. Just saying. And just wondering, how much do you have to hate Barack Obama to actually root for the Supreme Court to deprive 8 million of your fellow Americans of affordable health care? And finally, did I mention that I'm sick and tired of Hillary Clinton?
All right. Thank you, Rick. And thank you so very much for joining us. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
It's a complicated world out there, and Scott Walker simply isn't ready for prime time.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for joining us. Please stay warm and enjoy the rest of your weekend.